Hello, my name is Howard Knepper, and I'm a Republican running for the U.S. Senate in the general election. This election is one of the most important elections in the last century. There are numerous reasons why. One reason is that the Republicans must continue to have the majority of the upper chamber, which is, of course, the Senate. We cannot send Patrick Murphy, the Democratic nominee, to Washington as Florida's next senator. If we look back in the last 8 years of the Obama administration, it has been a disastrous foreign policy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I think we've already seen some of these disasters, but I'm going to point some of them out. Syria is absolutely one of the biggest disasters of the Obama administration. A few years ago, you can remember that Assad, the dictator, used chemical warfare on his own people. President Obama gave a national speech to the American people saying that we should watch those horrendous, horrible pictures and images of men and women and children laying on hospital floors. Now, he also said at the end of that speech that we could deliver a message to Assad, and only the U.S. military could do that. But at the end of that speech, he said that he wasn't going to do it. He was going to allow Russia, Syria's biggest ally, to take care of the problem. But we can see that that was a huge mistake. In the last couple of days, we've seen Assad again using chemical weapons on his own people. I would support the removal of Assad if the Congress believed that that was the right direction to go. There's no question that the civil war in Syria must come to an end. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. We have Russia interfering in this Syrian civil war. We also have ISIS that is in Syria. So I would support the following: to remove Assad from Syria as its dictator. I would also support a no-fly zone. I would also support pushing Russia back out of Syria and finally bringing this civil war to an end. I know that many people have stated that regime change is not the way to go, and sometimes that may be true. But in the case of Syria, we have ISIS inside of Syria, and we have a vicious dictator that I believe Assad has committed crimes against humanity and is a war criminal. There's no other way to put it. Anybody that would use chemical weapons on their own people and continue to slaughter its own people is a war criminal. Now we move on to North Korea and Iran. I said 10 years ago that we have to stop Iran and North Korea from their nuclear programs. I was told at that time that I was being aggressive and anxious. But obviously I wasn't, because now we've seen in the last couple of days North Korea testing missiles. We also have seen what Iran has done with their nuclear program. The Obama administration made one of the worst foreign policy decisions with Iran when we released the money to Iran and we allowed Iran to then be able to move forward with a nuclear weapon. They created some of their own terms. Not too long ago, a few years ago, a question was asked of Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State for President Nixon. And the question to Henry Kissinger was, why does the United States have to interfere with other countries that want to have a nuclear program? And Henry Kissinger responded and said that if the United States turns away and looks the other way, one of those countries could fire a nuclear weapon to one of its neighbors, and millions of people could be killed. And at that time, the superpowers, as the United States, would have to enter. But at that time, millions of people have already been killed, and the risk and the high risk to our military to have to enter would be terrible. Now, Newt Gingrich in the Republican National Convention talked about this, when he talked about 200,000 to 300,000 people could be killed in the event of a nuclear attack. I think that number is low. So the United States cannot, should not, and the Congress must address the issue of Iran and North Korea obtaining nuclear weapons. We've also seen Russia become aggressive in the last 5 years. Mr. Putin is not someone that can be dealt with nicely. He has the mindset of the leaders of the Cold War, and the United States must confront him and push him back. And yes, the United States military is prepared to deal with any threat to the United States. Yes, we should continue to support building up our military even stronger. If I were in the Senate, I would continue to vote for increases in military spending. We live in a dangerous world, but our enemies around the world should know this, that our military at any time, at any place, can be anywhere in the world to defend the United States and all of its interests around the world, with devastating consequences if necessary. Now, we can move on to other regions of the world that we have problems in foreign policy. China is another country that we must be very careful of aggression. If Patrick Murphy were to be sent to Washington as the senator from Florida, it would be dangerous, extremely dangerous. He is not prepared to be a senator of this state, and we would have 8 more years of the same foreign policy. We had a Secretary of State that's running for the President of the United States, Hillary Clinton. She was the worst Secretary of State, probably in U.S. history. Benghazi was only one example. But just recently, while she's been running for the President of the United States, she made a statement that she would never, ever allow ground troops to be sent to Iraq. Of course, none of us would ever send our men and women, ground troops, unnecessarily anywhere in the world. But to let the enemies of the world think that a president would never send ground troops somewhere in the world is ridiculous. The statement that she made was irresponsible, and it's something that should never have been said. I will tell you that foreign policy is one of the most important areas that our government deals with. So I ask you to be careful and make sure that you vote for a Republican to go to Washington as your senator. Do not vote for Patrick Murphy. There are numerous videos that I will be giving about why Patrick Murphy should not be sent to the U.S. Senate. It is very important that you pay attention to all of my videos and look closely at Patrick Murphy. Please vote Republican to make sure that we do not have the same 8 years of a foreign policy that's dangerous to the United States and dangerous to the world. President Nixon once said that the only leader of the world should be the United States. He said that if we had, and we are, the leader of the world, there will be less wars, there will be less starvation. But if the United States is not the leader of the world, there will be more wars and more starvation. We must not advocate this responsibility to anyone because they cannot do what the United States can do. We must support our veterans always, past, present, and future, and their families. We must make sure that our military maintains and becomes the strongest and stays the strongest military in the world. Our foreign policy is extremely important to all of us. Thank you, and God bless our military, and God bless the people of Florida.